Yo, the man who thought a multi-million-dollar crypto fund could buy him absolute immunity just found out that the internet doesn't care about your liquid assets. Joseph Isaac McCann, the 45-year-old mastermind behind Asymmetric Financial, thought his first move back on American soil would permanently wipe the slate clean. Instead, bro literally painted a massive glowing infrared target right on his own back. Imagine flying your lifestyle influencer fiancée, Ashlee Jenae, halfway across the world to a hyper-luxury villa in Zanzibar for her 31st birthday. You propose, she says yes, the ring is flashing, and then less than 48 hours later, she's found unresponsive under circumstances so unbelievably shady they make a Hollywood thriller look tame. But it's his very first action after her heart stopped beating that has the entire true crime community and her family completely terrified. He didn't panic. He didn't scream. Bro went straight into absolute data containment. Before we dissect the cold, corporate choreography of exactly what Joe McCann did the second he realized the receipts were leaking, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Because mama, we are about to expose what the mainstream media is paid to look past. Are you ready? Let's get into it. When we talk about introducing a global scandal, you have to look at the players on the board to understand why this entire situation feels so incredibly calculated. Joseph Isaac McCann isn't just some random tourist who had a tragic vacation experience in a foreign country. This is a 45-year-old crypto fund manager, the founder of Asymmetric Financial, a guy who routinely deals with institutional millions, risk assessment, and total narrative control. He is a person who builds high-level algorithmic systems and manages millions of dollars for Silicon Valley elite investors. On the other side, you have Ashlee Robinson, known to her hundreds of thousands of followers as Ashlee Jenae, a beautiful, vibrant 31-year-old lifestyle influencer, a girl who literally just appeared in Drake's music video and was on top of her digital world. When these two worlds collided on a birthday trip to the exotic beaches of Tanzania, nobody expected it to end with a casket flying back to New Jersey. The reason why the public is completely losing its mind right now is because Joe McCann has a background that makes every single move he makes look like a corporate crisis management operation rather than the actions of a grieving fiancé. This man has built his entire life around predicting market crashes, mitigating liabilities, and protecting data. So when the news broke that Ashlee Jenae was found unconscious in their luxury villa at the Zuri Zanzibar resort, the internet immediately started tracking the corporate playbook. To make matters worse, the cultural memory of the internet is incredibly sharp right now. The public is looking at this case and instantly drawing dark parallels to past high-profile tragedies that left young women dead abroad under deeply suspicious circumstances. People are screaming the name Shankella Robinson, the young woman whose tragic death in Cabo San Lucas was initially labeled as alcohol poisoning by local officials, until the internet demanded real investigative transparency. They are referencing the Gabby Petito case, where a male partner used immediate silence, legal shields, and a massive head start to manipulate the timeline while a family was left in absolute agony. It is this specific pattern of behavior that has fans and true crime sleuths on high alert. The moment a rich, powerful man with top-tier legal connections is involved in a tragedy overseas, the red flags start flying at full mast. The internet already knows how the traditional playbook operates. You stay quiet, you let the local foreign authorities handle the initial narrative, you secure your passport, and you don't say a single word until you are back on American soil where your legal team has constructed an absolute fortress around you. Joe McCann fits this exact demographic archetype perfectly, and that is exactly why his reputation preceded him the second this case hit the mainstream media radar. The level of suspense in this entire case reaches a boiling point when you look at the absolute blackout that occurred immediately following the incident. Any human being who just witnessed their best friend and future wife go down in a foreign country would be screaming for help, blasting social media for emergency medical contact, and keeping the family updated every single second. But instead, the timeline reveals a chilling pattern of calculated retreat. The public reaction shifted from deep sadness to absolute fury when the details of his first real action started leaking through various news outlets like CBS News and the New York Post. People started realizing that while Ashlee Jenae was taking her last breaths, a corporate defensive wall was actively being constructed. This wasn't a normal guy panic-stricken in an unfamiliar territory. This was a high-stakes financial executive realizing that a massive personal crisis was about to collide with his multi-million-dollar investment fund. When you have institutional limited partners on your cap table, a suspicious death investigation isn't just a personal tragedy. It is a catastrophic financial liability that can freeze bank accounts, trigger massive compliance audits, and destroy business operations overnight. The internet caught onto this dynamic instantly, realizing that Joe's immediate silence wasn't a product of paralyzing grief, but a highly strategic move to contain the damage before the financial markets could react. What intensifies the mystery even further is the way his legal team, led by attorney Edward Andrew Zick, stepped into the arena. They didn't come out swinging with emotional declarations or a desperate search for answers. They released highly polished, legally vetted statements that read more like a corporate quarterly earnings report than a message of deep personal loss. This robotic, highly calculated approach has fans seriously worried because it feels like the narrative is being heavily manufactured behind the scenes. True crime commentators and digital sleuths started digging into his historical digital footprint, tracking how he handles data, how his fund operates, and how he manages public relations. The consensus across social media platforms was instantaneous. Joe McCann was operating exactly like a founder during a catastrophic product failure. He went into lockdown mode, wiped his public data paths, and went completely dark. This specific action of treating a human life like a corporate asset that needs to be legally protected is what has turned the public entirely against him. The suspicion isn't just coming from random internet trolls. It is being fueled by the stark contrast between how Ashlee's family is acting with raw, transparent pain, and how Joe's camp is executing a perfectly timed public relations strategy. The tension becomes almost unbearable when you realize that this entire situation was unfolding thousands of miles away from American jurisdiction, in a place where local reporting can be easily influenced and official documents can take weeks to process. The public knows that in foreign luxury resorts, the number one priority for local management and tourism boards is to protect the image of the destination. A high-profile murder investigation destroys luxury tourism, so the initial impulse is always to frame these tragedies as sudden, unexplainable self-harm incidents or tragic accidents. Because the public has watched this exact same scenario play out in multiple international cases before, nobody is buying the initial local narratives anymore. The internet has evolved into a global, crowdsourced detective agency that analyzes body language, tracks flight paths, scrutinizes word choices, and connects dots faster than traditional law enforcement agencies. Joe McCann underestimated the sheer power of this modern digital audience. He assumed that by staying silent in Tanzania and maintaining a low profile while his legal team worked the channels, the narrative would remain under his control. But the second he touched down on U.S. soil and thought it was safe to drop a carefully curated statement on X, the entire digital community was waiting with a magnifying glass, ready to dismantle every single syllable. The contrast between his multi-million-dollar corporate shield and the raw determination of a grieving family has set the stage for a massive narrative war. And the first section of this scandal is just the tip of an incredibly dark iceberg that is about to completely unravel right before our eyes. When you peel back the layers of this corporate damage control strategy, the forensic breakdown of what happened immediately after Ashlee Jenae took her last breath is what truly terrifies the audience. According to official leaks and hotel documentation from the Zuri Zanzibar resort, the timeline of events doesn't just look chaotic, it looks meticulously managed. The local police confirmed that an intense verbal altercation took place between Joe McCann and Ashlee Robinson on the night of April 8th. This wasn't a minor disagreement over dinner plans. The conflict was so incredibly loud and disruptive that the resort security and management had to step in, physically separating the newly engaged couple and forcing Joe to move to a completely separate luxury villa, located a full 10-minute walk across the property. A few hours after this forced separation, a hotel staff member discovered Ashlee completely unresponsive inside a room closet. Instead of an immediate frantic scramble to notify the people who raised her, a massive 11-hour communication blackout descended upon the entire situation. Think about the psychological weight of that 11-hour gap. Ashlee's mother, Yolanda Endres, later revealed to major news networks that when Joe finally decided to dial her number, he didn't deliver the news with the raw panic of a man whose world had just collapsed. He casually stated that Ashlee was stable after an incident, offered almost zero concrete details, and abruptly ended the conversation. The family didn't find out their daughter was dead from her future husband. They found out hours later when the hotel administration called them directly to report the fatality. But it is what Joe did during and immediately after this blackout that has digital sleuths screaming foul play. Before a formal forensic examination could even begin on African soil, before the American consulate could properly intervene, Joe McCann took his highly followed social media platforms, locked them down to completely private, changed his identifiable profile images, and began scrubbing specific data trails. When an enterprise software engineer and elite quantitative trader immediately initiates data containment protocols, while his fiancée's body is resting in a foreign morgue, you aren't looking at natural human grief. You are looking at an expert running a digital sanitation protocol to protect an institutional asset. The breakdown of evidence gets even more chilling when you look at the physical receipts left behind in Tanzania. Ashlee's father, Harry Robinson, dropped an absolute bombshell during an exclusive media interview when he revealed that while his daughter's physical remains were eventually flown back to New Jersey for her homecoming service, absolutely none of her personal belongings accompanied her. Her designer luggage, her clothing, her private diaries, and the massive, expensive diamond engagement ring that Joe had filmed himself sliding onto her finger during their safari just days prior had completely vanished into thin air. The family has been left entirely in the dark, with Joe's camp completely refusing to provide a transparent inventory of where her final possessions are. The public reaction across TikTok and true crime spaces shifted from standard suspicion to pure horror, because this withholding of personal effects implies that everything Ashlee owned, including her phone and digital devices, is being insulated from her blood relatives. While the internet was actively demanding answers about the missing ring and the resort timeline, Joe's high-priced legal representative, Edward Andrew Zick, was working behind the scenes to construct a financial fortress around his client. Joe McCann is the public face of Asymmetric Financial, a prominent crypto investment fund that manages institutional capital from the most powerful venture entities in Silicon Valley, including Andreessen Horowitz and Circle Incorporated. In the brutal world of high finance asset management, even the slight whisper of a violent criminal investigation can trigger an immediate cascading disaster. Limited partners will execute emergency withdrawal clauses, federal compliance officers will initiate deep forensic audits, and banking institutions will instantly freeze operational liquidity. The polished statement released by Joe's legal team over the weekend, which went out of its way to specifically praise the professionalism of the Zanzibar police and thank the State Department, was an obvious, highly calculated corporate signal. It wasn't designed to honor Ashlee's memory. It was designed to reassure nervous multi-millionaire investors that the founder was cooperative, legally safe, and maintaining total control over the narrative, completely sidestepping the preliminary medical findings from a local facility that indicated the immediate cause of death was cerebral hypoxia consistent with strangulation and suffocation. The absolute audacity of this corporate choreography is what turned the public space into a digital war zone. People began pulling up ancient tweets, past financial filings, and tracking Joe's historical behavior to show that this is a man who knows exactly how to manipulate systems when the stakes are high. The internet community immediately identified the specific legal strategy being deployed here. It is the classic corporate minimization technique where you reduce a human tragedy down to a simple, unpreventable operational variable. They tried to lean heavily into a local suicide narrative to wrap the case up quickly and protect the resort's high-end tourism image, but the digital crowd completely refused to swallow the script. Anonymous hotel sources began whispering to independent bloggers that the fight before her death involved intense screaming that could be heard through the villa walls, completely contradicting the pristine, perfect love story that Joe's team attempted to paint in his eventual public post on X. The public backlash reached an unprecedented peak because audiences are no longer passive consumers of mainstream media spin. They are active, crowdsourced investigators who recognize that an elite crypto executive has the financial leverage to build a PR runway that completely suppresses the truth. And this brings us directly into the massive fallout that is about to shatter his entire financial empire as the investigation moves to American soil. The financial fallout and impending legal catastrophe following this calculated digital retreat are where the corporate shield completely begins to disintegrate under the intense pressure of public scrutiny. Joe McCann thought that by successfully navigating the local authorities in Tanzania, securing the release of his passport, and touching down on American soil, the worst of the crisis was behind him. He genuinely believed that a highly polished legal statement thanking government officials would act as an absolute barrier against further inquiry. But what his legal team, led by Edward Andrew Zick, failed to anticipate was the devastating mechanical power of a U.S.-based independent forensic investigation, colliding with a multi-million-dollar corporate entity. Behind closed doors at Asymmetric Financial, the atmosphere has turned completely toxic. Institutional limited partners who poured tens of millions of dollars into Joe's quantitative crypto strategies during the funding booms are not sentimental people. They are hyper-calculating risk managers who cannot afford to have their sovereign wealth funds or venture portfolios linked to an active international homicide investigation. Internal murmurs from anonymous tech sources indicate that emergency board meetings have been called, and several major investors are already quietly activating their moral turpitude and material adverse change clauses to legally claw back their capital before federal regulatory bodies freeze the fund's operational liquidity entirely. The legal nightmare is accelerating at a pace that no public relations firm can suppress. While Joe's team attempts to position him as a grieving partner performing legally vetted regret, Ashlee's family has completely bypassed his PR traps by maintaining an absolute, strategic silence. They are not engaging in messy back-and-forth social media feuds. Instead, they have mobilized federal law enforcement contacts and top-tier American medical examiners to prepare for a comprehensive, independent U.S.-based autopsy and toxicology review, the second her remains are fully processed in New Jersey. History has already proven that when a foreign jurisdiction rushes a suicide or accident narrative to protect its local tourism industry, a meticulous American medical examination acts as an absolute sledgehammer to the cover-up. If the U.S. coroner's final report officially confirms that the physical trauma, tissue damage, and cerebral hypoxia are completely inconsistent with self-harm and explicitly point to manual strangulation, the entire legal landscape shifts from a tragic overseas incident to an active federal investigation. The Department of Justice and the FBI maintain strict jurisdiction over crimes committed against American citizens abroad under specific maritime and territorial statutes, meaning Joe's expensive corporate lawyers will no longer be dealing with compliant local resort police, but with federal prosecutors who possess the resources to dismantle any manufactured alibi. The psychological warfare being waged through the media is reaching an unprecedented level of tension, as the public watches the corporate machine attempt to rewrite history in real time. Mainstream outlets like Fortune and CoinDesk are already shifting their framing, slowly transitioning from sympathetic portrayals of a bereaved fiancé to highly technical, investigative exposes focusing entirely on Joe's financial profile, his past business dealings, and the immense wealth he utilized to secure his rapid exit from Zanzibar. True crime audiences are meticulously analyzing the specific, adversarial language embedded within his lawyer's public updates, particularly the highly toxic phrase claiming Joe was met with silence when reaching out to Ashlee's grieving mother. The internet community immediately recognized this as a classic corporate victim-blaming tactic, designed to shift public sympathy away from a shattered family and onto a wealthy executive. But this strategy has completely backfired, igniting a massive grassroots boycott against any digital platform, media outlet, or financial institution that attempts to give Joe McCann a soft, unchallenging runway to perform his rehearsed narrative. The crowd is explicitly demanding that any upcoming media appearance face a rigorous, forensic cross-examination regarding the 11-hour communication blackout, the physical removal of Joe by resort staff due to a violent altercation, and the terrifying decision to publicly push for cremation when the cause of death is actively being disputed by the victim's blood relatives. As the digital dragnet tightens, the total isolation of Joseph Isaac McCann becomes impossible to hide from the global audience. True crime sleuths have pointed out a devastating anomaly in his support system. While Ashlee's life, legacy, and community are beautifully documented by thousands of organic photos, tearful public statements from siblings, and a massive outpouring of love from the cultural elite, Joe stands completely alone in the shadows of his corporate fortress. Not a single member of the McCann family, not a single long-term personal friend, and not a single prominent crypto founder has stepped forward to publicly defend his character or validate his version of events. His entire existence is exposed as a heavily curated, synthetic persona manufactured to raise institutional capital, and that persona is completely fracturing under the weight of real-world receipts. The public backlash has evolved far beyond standard internet noise. It is now a historical turning point in how crowdsourced detective work outpaces traditional, slow-moving international diplomacy. 5 years from now, legal textbooks will look back at the Ashlee Jenae case as the definitive moment where crypto wealth, foreign jurisdictions, and digital influencer culture collided, and the audience completely refused to blink. Joe McCann is discovering that returning home doesn't mean the investigation is over. It means he has simply walked into a high-tech forensic cage where every tweet, every transaction, and every past relationship will be systematically dismantled until the absolute truth is laid bare before the world. And there is absolutely nothing his millions can do to stop the impending collapse of his freedom and his empire. Joe McCann thought his corporate wealth could buy him an absolute digital clean slate, but he completely miscalculated the raw power of an internet that never forgets. The corporate runway his legal team built is already crumbling under the immense weight of these physical receipts. He thinks his upcoming rehearsed media appearance will quiet the global storm, but a grieving family armed with independent U.S. forensic reports is about to drop a medical sledgehammer that no amount of crypto money can spin away. But what do you guys think about this entire situation? Why do you believe Joe's very first instinct during that 11-hour blackout was to lock down his digital footprint and isolate her personal belongings? Do you think his high-powered Silicon Valley financial backers are the ones pulling the strings behind these calculated legal statements to protect their own balance sheets? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's dismantle this narrative together. If you want to make sure the truth isn't buried by corporate PR, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell so you never miss a single update on this case. Stay sharp, watch the receipts, and I will see you in the next one.